Hey, this is Al McGhee with your entertainment ticket. I'm here at the Parker Playhouse here in Fort Lauderdale. I'm here with Lynn Novick. Well, who is she? Well, she's a partner and a producer with Ken Burns, and they have a brand new documentary out called Prohibition. And, I'm really happy and glad to be here with this lovely lady because you've done some tremendous work. But tell us about your new project, Prohibition, that you're here to promote here in Fort Lauderdale.
Well, it's great to be here, Al. Thank you for having me. Prohibition is a 3-part series. It's coming out on PBS in October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. It covers the history of Prohibition, which is something we all heard about in school for maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah, but we only heard about the gangsters and things like that. Exactly. That's all we heard. And I'm from Chicago, of course, Al Capone,
Yes, we know about gangsters and flappers. That's pretty much it. And we know it was a really bad idea. And we really have no idea why did America think it was a good idea. And for us, what was really interesting was to kind of delve back into the history, look back 100 years before it even happened, and find out why did the country want Prohibition? Because a lot of people thought it was going to work. A lot of people thought we need this. We've got a problem with alcoholism, which they didn't call it that, but the problem of drink or drunkards. Mm-hmm. There was serious worry that this was destroying our society and we need to do something about it. And yeah, they took a sledgehammer to kill a flea, you could argue, that eliminating alcohol or banning alcohol from the entire society was not actually the best way to deal with the problem of alcoholism. But there was a lot of noble sort of idealism and hopefulness, wishful thinking you might call it, right, that went into trying this experiment, right, which utterly failed.
Well, Lynn, also, many people in their minds, they feel that women started this type of movement to ban alcohol. Right. Are you going to show that in your documentary, or are you going to really show the whole history? You did mention you're going to go back some, but yeah, what's the big role for women in this?
That's a great, great question. I'm so glad you asked. Women are at the center of this story from beginning to end. It really was the first time that women sort of asserted themselves in society and said, as women, we don't vote, and we would never presume to tell the men what to do. That's not our position, or that's not our proper role. But we have this serious problem. Men are drinking too much. They're drinking up their paychecks. They're beating us. They're abusing people. And as women, as the sort of moral guardians of society, we need to do something about this. And so we need to sort of pray and implore and just sort of beg the society to get rid of alcohol. When that didn't work, they became political activists. And they said, you know what? We need the vote. Because without the vote, we have no power. And without the vote, we can't get rid of alcohol. And so that was actually a major impetus to ask for the vote. Was we don't really care about anything else. We just want to fix this alcohol problem. So women really sort of as the moral guardians of society made this idea of prohibition something that became very mainstream. Mm-hmm. But then once prohibition began, there was this enormous rebellion against it. And women were a big part of that too.
Really?
So women were drinking, which they hadn't done before. Women were going to speakeasies. Women were flappers and smoking and staying out all night. And how do we say it, being liberated with men, mm-hmm, in a way that really hadn't been happening. That was in the works before Prohibition, but Prohibition was sort of alcohol on the flame. It really sort of just exponentially increased the sexual liberation that happened in the 20s, which scared a lot of people who didn't like it, but it was, once you let the genie out of the bottle, it's happening. And then, as Prohibition was shown to be really such a failure, women came forward and said, we as women don't think Prohibition is working, we need to get rid of it. And that movement of women saying we need to stop it, that's what pushed it over the top to finally get rid of it in 1933.
Wow, so women did play a big role in this. I didn't realize that. I thought it was because of all the crime and things like that that's really helped that amendment to be adjusted or to get repealed. Yes. Yeah,
I mean, the crime was definitely a big problem. That Prohibition sort of opened the way for organized crime to happen. Before that, you had sort of gangs and criminal activity locally, but there wasn't much incentive for a gangster in Chicago to cooperate with somebody in Florida. But when you have Prohibition, you have all this alcohol coming into the country or being transported around, and rival gangs killing each other over territory. A lot of the gangsters or the mobsters sort of got together on a national basis and said, you know what, let's organize ourselves a little bit better here so we don't, there's so much money to be made, let's all sort of agree to play nice. And that's how organized crime got started.
Wow. And again, when I think about Prohibition, though, I always think about that time in America where, I thought more freedoms for more people was coming, ahead for especially minorities and women too. Is that in your documentary too, some of that?
That's a great question. one of the things that was, I think, really disturbing to me that I learned in working on the film was that there was a tremendous amount of hatred and fear-mongering that went on leading up to Prohibition and during it, sort of demonizing immigrants and looking down on African Americans, and the Ku Klux Klan was hugely powerful.
Right.
Sort of, you know, it was a hugely important political force. For example, the Ku Klux Klan, they were anti-Catholic, virulently anti-Jewish and anti-black, as we know, and they were very much anti-alcohol. And to them, this sort of triumvirate all linked together, that the white race needs to be supreme, and that the lower races, as they would say, can't handle alcohol. And so therefore we need to sort of control everything by not having alcohol. So the question of race and civility and sort of bigotry is a hugely important part of what happened during Prohibition.
Wow, I didn't realize that the Klan was against alcohol at that time. Wow, I'm going to learn something else.
Okay, now you know what's also really strange is that Prohibition became such a mainstream goal in the 19-teens. All kinds of weird, strange bedfellows got together over it. So you had the Ku Klux Klan and you had the NAACP, both supporting Prohibition. And you had the Industrial Workers of the World, which is a sort of very radical labor organization, and you had Henry Ford and John D. Rockefeller supporting Prohibition, all for different reasons. But it kind of became this huge bandwagon that everybody had to get on. And each different group felt for their own reasons, well, we have our issues with society, and this little magic bullet, that's going to fix everything. It didn't take too long to find out that it didn't fix anything.
So, Lynn, how did you and Ken sit down and say, hey, well, let's do a documentary about Prohibition? How did you come up with this?
Well, you know, this was a really happy accident for us. We have a very good friend, Dan Okrent, who's a writer and a historian. And we interviewed him for our film on baseball. And also, he was in our film on jazz, and he's been a huge help to us on many projects. And he started working on a book about Prohibition about 6 or 7 years ago. And he was telling us all the different things he'd been finding out about Prohibition and what a great story it was. And he said, you know, this would really make a great film. And we said, you know what, you're actually exactly right. Wow. And so he's in the film a lot. He was an advisor, and he really helped us with our research. And it was a wonderful sort of happy marriage between the two of us, or three of us, to make the film.
Well, Lynn, you have done a few projects with Ken. Well, why did you decide to get into documentary films, and why did you decide to get into filmmaking, period?
Sometimes it's hard to remember when you're 22 or 23 exactly why. I don't know that I had a rational reason. I think I just felt compelled to do it. And I'm not sure I can exactly articulate why. I really wanted to do something in the public sphere that would bring history to a wide audience, sort of popularize history, which I was really interested in. And I didn't want to sit in a library sort of doing some very narrow scope of work that would never see the light of day. I really wanted to do something that could reach an audience and could tell stories about history, because that's what interested me. And I don't think I really understood how actually difficult it is to make a film. Right. If I'd ever done it, I don't think I would have presumed that I would know how. Honestly, thank God I didn't know. I remember seeing films and thinking, oh, you know, that's, I don't know what I want to do. I think that's what I want to do. I had no idea how much time and effort is taken. Every single image you see on film, you know, enormous amount of work has gone into just finding that image, deciding how long it should be on, what's the music going to be, who's going to be talking, what are they going to be saying, is it accurate, does it tell the story you want, does the whole film, if it's 2 hours long, make sense, is it coherent, does it hold your attention, all those things I didn't think about as an audience member. I just thought, oh, this is really cool, this is what I'd like to do. Wow. So I just got lucky.
Oh, that's a good piece of luck right there. Great piece of luck. Now, just one more question now. The music, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of jazz in this, because, you know, jazz age started at that time. And I'm going to tell you this, too, personally, Louis Armstrong, to me, was the best entertainer of all times in the 20th century. That's just my personal opinion about musicians. But are you going to incorporate a lot of jazz music into this? Oh,
absolutely. And just to concur with you on Louis Armstrong, not only was he the greatest entertainer, he was one of the greatest artists of the 20th century and one of the greatest musicians of all time. So we were very happy to celebrate his achievements and his unbelievable contribution to the world in our jazz film. And we have some of his music in this show as well. But having made the film on the history of jazz, we had immersed ourselves in the music of the 20s and 30s. So it was really fun to go back and pick out our favorites and put a lot of them in. So we have Ellington, we have Benny Goodman, we have the Blue Devils, we have a whole range of great, great music. And the thing is, the music, it's not an accident that Prohibition and this music both came around the same time, because the venues where so many of these great musicians, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, so many actually got their start, were speakeasies, because the mobsters who ran the places needed entertainment, and there was an enormous market for musicians. So they got a place to sort of hone their craft and develop their artistry and get paid for it. Right. And there was a big audience, and they had to have entertainment, and they sold more drinks, and it all, and then they were making music for dancing, and that kind of, there was an incredible symbiotic relationship between the dancing and the music, and that's one of the reasons why the music is so extraordinary and has such incredible energy, is because it was made for dancing. And that just allowed jazz to sort of flower in a way that I don't know, if it hadn't been for Prohibition, it wouldn't have happened. Yeah. And it also was this sort of liberation from, reading the notes on the page. There was something a little bit illicit about what was going on. This was not totally legit activity, a speakeasy. And so you're kind of free from social norms in a way that I think, sort of like anything goes. It's just like the lid was off in those kind of places, and that's what the music was expressing, that as well as fueling it. So we had a lot of fun picking the music for the show. Wow,
I can't wait to see this. Lynn, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex.
I've always been a big fan of yours. You do great work. Please continue doing that. Really.
Well, thank you. We're now on to, I'm working with kind of a very serious subject, so this Prohibition was really, really fun because, yeah, there's some very serious aspects to it, but it also it's tremendously entertaining, and there's a lot of humor. One of my favorite statistics from the film is, America banned the sale of alcohol, and yet so few people obeyed the law that by 1928, we'd become the largest importer of cocktail shakers in the world. So there's the irony right there, right? Yeah. Big market for cocktail shakers right here where we're not allowed to have alcohol. So it's been fun. We laughed a lot making the film, and that was fun because now I'm working with Ken on a film about the Vietnam War, which is not really very funny at all. So
no, it's not.
No, but it's a privilege to work on. But this was a wonderful sort of, even though it's serious, there's a lot of humor and uplift in it too.
I can't wait to see that one because that's really part of my life there.
Oh yeah. We'll have to talk after.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn, again.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.